All right, away we go. So I'd like to welcome everybody to Statistical Analysis in Psychology. This is our intro to this course today. So what we're going to do is we're basically going to go over what this course is going to be all about, what you can expect, what is expected of you, and just make sure that everybody's on the same page, that we know where we're going, and importantly, how we're all going to get there. So the plan for today is to start off with a brief introduction. I'll let you know who I am. Some of you I recognize. I've seen you before in my classes. Others are brand new, so we'll go through one of the hardest parts of the course, how to pronounce my name, and then I'll tell you a little bit about the research projects that I do, that I use, the very skills you're going to be developing in this course to accomplish, and then I'll also mention the Stigma-Free initiative that I'm a part of. After that, we're going to take a look at the course overview, what this course is all about. We're going to take a look at the course procedure, how things are going to run, so that you can plan your semester and know exactly what's coming up and what we're going to be doing. And then we're going to end it with some syllabus highlights, taking a look at the syllabus just so that you know how to navigate the syllabus, especially the class schedule, to make sure that you don't miss any assignments, any pre-tests, any of the learning opportunities that you have. All right, so let's start out first with who I am. So my name is Dr. Juricevic, and it seems complicated at first if you just take a look at it as a whole, but it's kind of like statistics, where statistics seems complicated at first if you look at it at a whole. But what we're going to do this semester is we're going to break it down into little pieces that you either already know how to do, or you'll develop the skills to do, and then you'll see that the end result is going to be very straightforward. So much like statistics, let's break down my name. It starts off with a U, and then there's a reach, and then you open up and say ah, and finally there's a veach. And if you are minoring in mathematics, you might know that that little triangle there is a veach. So it's U, reach, veach. Let's try that on 3. 1, 2, 3. All right, that was okay. That wasn't too bad. But let's try it one more time on 3. 1, 2, 3. All right, much better. So this is going to be an important slide. It's an important slide in all my courses, especially so in statistics, because in statistics, you're going to have a lot of questions. In statistics, you're going to encounter a lot of challenges. And at any point in this course, feel free to refer to this slide, put your hand up and say, Dr. Juricevic, can you go over that Excel formula one more time? Dr. Juricevic, I'm not entirely sure what you meant by null hypothesis. Can you maybe give us another explanation? And then you're going to see in this course we have practice time built into just about every single class meeting. And that's another perfect time to use this slide. And as you're doing your practice, you can put up your hand and say, Dr. Juricevic, I have tried this problem 3 times. I still am struggling with it. Can you help me out? Can you give me a hint? Can you show me how to do this? And I will happily come on by and give you the assistance that you need. So, important slide. Please feel free to refer to it. Feel free to ask as many questions as you need. Stats is something that everybody can do, but not everybody does it in the same way, and not everybody gets to the end along the same path. So whatever path you're on, I'll try my best to kind of design a learning experience that will work for everybody. But if you need a little tweak here, a little tweak there, put the hand up, Dr. Juricevic, and I will come by and make sure that you get the help that you need. All right, so that's the name. Let's talk a little bit about the research project. So one of the reasons that I like teaching this course is because this is a lot of the skills that I use every day in the research that I do. So a lot of the tests, a lot of the procedures that you will be doing in this course are things that I do on a daily basis when I take a look at some of my research. So when I analyze my research these days, I am working on a concept known as visual language. So visual language is the nonverbal communications that we have, the visual communications that we have, is basically how do we communicate with pictures. And with our current media, with our current ways of communicating in Twitter and Instagram and all these forms of visual communication, it's becoming very, very important to understand, just like we understand how we communicate verbally or written word, how do we communicate visually? Well, the way that I study this is I study a area that has a very well-developed visual language, and that is comic books. So my research is primarily involved in analyzing comic books and discovering what their structure, what their design has to say about the way that our minds process and understand visual language. So I'll give you an example of a visual, a portion of visual language. So here we have a cover for Daredevil, and you can see there's a certain structure to this image here. The Kingpin is drawn in gigantic, with a gigantic image. Daredevil is drawn over here. This is by one artist, this is by a completely different artist, and yet you can see that they have the same structure. The villain is drawn using gigantic size, and the hero is off to the side in both cases. So this is an example of two different visual sentences that are using the same visual grammar. So they're both using this idea of the villain having gigantic size to show that the villain is dangerous, that they're powerful, they're important to the story. And then at the same time, they have the hero over here, but not centered on the page, asymmetrically placed on the page in both cases. And what that is telling you is that's a metaphor for letting you know that the hero is like you, but not like you. He's something that is kind of human, but also kind of not human, because symmetry is something that we all have. It's something that most things in nature have. It's something that most things that are usual have. So this is a very nice way for the artist to tell you Daredevil is a little bit unusual and communicate that using visual language. So studies that I've done using this technique in analyzing comics, there was a study on how do we understand and perceive motion. So it is very apparent that the Flash here is running, but it is very also apparent that this is a static image. This is not a motion picture. He's not moving at all, yet we understand and we perceive the motion, the running. And we specifically took a look at how literal devices, things like the literal placement of his arms and the legs, the literal lean of his body as he runs, combined with metaphorical elements, things that don't happen in the real world, things like these action lines here, and how do those combine to communicate effectively that this individual is running, and in this case, running very fast. And if you're interested in that research, it is available open access online at the Comics Grid. What we found was that your mind works in a way that it takes in literal information and keeps adding to its perception. So more literal information makes the picture better and better and better. However, metaphorical information is added once, and then additional metaphorical information doesn't improve the picture. And that's why most pictures communicate their ideas with one metaphor. Tons of literal information, but only the one metaphor. Another research project that I was working on with a former undergrad, who's actually now, we continue to work on this, he's getting ready to go to grad school, is one on the use of gigantic size. So here we have an image of Mockingbird, and you can see that she's portrayed in, with gigantic size. This is a metaphorical use of gigantic size. If anybody is familiar with Mockingbird, she is a regular-sized human being. All right, so that's her right there. That's her right there. She's just a regular-sized individual. But here, this gigantic size is being used metaphorically to communicate that she's powerful, to communicate that she's important, central to the story. On the other hand, here we have gigantic size being used again, but this time it's literal. So this portrayal of Galactus is supposed to be a literal depiction of his size. He is literally a gigantic cosmic being. So the question that we asked was, how do we know? How do we know that this is supposed to be taken metaphorically and this is supposed to be taken literally? So the linguistic equivalent is if somebody tells you, oh, John has a heart of stone, how do you know that you're supposed to take that metaphorically and say, oh, John is emotionless, John is cold, rather than take it literally and say, John needs to be rushed to the hospital right now. So that's what we asked, and we analyzed different sources of information, contextual information, what you know about the genre, structural information, what is actually there in the picture, and it turns out that we combine those in different ways, and we have preferences for certain interpretations, and if you're interested in that, we published that one in the International Journal of Comic Art. I published that with Christopher Crawford. All right, last example. And again, these are all studies that we used statistics to understand the data. The last example was a study that we did on where do metaphors come from. So when you see this metaphor here, just about everybody has encountered this metaphor before. Just about everybody understands that this person has just had a great idea, right? The light bulb above the head, that's a great idea. But somebody had to do that first. Right? Somebody was the first person who drew that picture and said, the light bulb above the head, that's what we're going to use for a great idea. So we were asking, well, where do these metaphors come from and how do they spread? How do they propagate and spread throughout the visual language? So we didn't take a look at the light bulb on top of the head. What we took a look at was a metaphor that is often used in comics illustration, and this is the metaphor of close-up eye asymmetry. So we have images here that are close-ups, all right, so just the shoulders and the head, that's a close-up image. And then they also have asymmetry drawn into the picture focused on the eyes. So here we have Storm, and she has her hair coming down asymmetrically on one side only. She has a lightning bolt coming out of the other eye asymmetrically on one eye only. There is nothing about her powers that are asymmetrical. Here we have Magneto, master of magnetism. Whoops. And once again, we see his magnetic powers coming out of his eye asymmetrically. Nothing asymmetric about his powers. Here we have from the Harbinger series, again, psychic powers coming out asymmetrically. And you can do it with the depiction of powers. You can do it using light and shadow. You can do it with the placement of objects. So there's no need to place a camera like that in front of your eye. You could have placed it like that. You could have placed it more symmetrically. And especially this one with the skull. You might argue that, well, that's how you use a camera. But that's not how you use a skull. And again, we see this asymmetry, and not in general, but mostly concentrated on the eye. And then you can also do it with composition. So here we have, once again, that visual grammar we talked about before of the gigantic image. And once again, we have the individual placed off to the side for the asymmetry on the eye. And we also have double asymmetry here because he's massively scarred on that one eye. Lightning bolt only on one eye. Witchblade covering up Lara Croft off to the side. So this is something that's very commonly used in comic books. And what it signals is it signals two things. The closeness signals that the individual is like you. So the close-up is a visual way of saying that this particular image, this particular person here, they're like you. They have stuff in common with you. The asymmetry then is a way of saying, but not totally common, not totally like you. So it's kind of this dual message of like you and unlike you. And it's been used over and over again. It's been used in film as well. So here's Cable from Deadpool 2. And we traced it using developmental theories, using artistic development theories, using the idea of a crystallizing experience, using the idea of artistic trajectories. And what we found was that this can actually be traced back to one single image by David Bowie, and it was a cover of his album Aladdin Sane. So this image here that conveyed that Bowie was like you and at the same time unlike you was the initial event. It was the initial crystallizing experience. And if you take a look at who uses close-up asymmetry the most in comic books, it was people who were at the right age when this album came out, individuals who are around 9 to 13 years old. That's when we're most susceptible to artistic influences. And that came out in the 90s when they were in their early 30s, which is when most artists produce their most prolific and greatest work. So everything kind of came together, showed us that that was the initial event. And if you're interested in that, you can also read that once again in the comics grid and take a look at some of the stats that we used for that as well. All right, so just to really quickly wrap up this look at the research. So if you're interested, not so much on Instagram anymore, but I still post on Twitter at Polite Insane. And if you want to take a look at some of the comic book research that we do, I usually hashtag that with Comic Book Scientist. And if it involves a student, I put it in my Too Hard for Soft Science category as well. All right, last little thing about, and this relates to the course as well. I also have a YouTube page, and there's a link for it. I'll also post that in Canvas as well. And what I do and what I was setting up this morning is I record these lectures, and then I post them on YouTube so you can have access to them after the class is done. So I usually get them done within 24 hours. And as you can see, there's a previous one there. So from last year's statistical analysis in psychology, we already have videos up. So, and we have it from the spring as well. So this is a nice way to do two things. Number one, it's a great way for you to kind of review what you saw in class today. So for some of you, first time you see a statistical concept, it'll make sense, boom, you're done. For others, it might take a little bit, a few more times. So it's a nice way to say, you know what, I was kind of confused about today's lecture, I didn't really know what was going on. Let me take another look at it. And you can go to my YouTube channel, you can rewatch this very speech right now, you can rewatch this if you want. And it can help you to kind of just get that concept, see it enough times so that it finally makes sense to you. The other way you can use this YouTube channel is I do have complete courses for some of my courses already posted. So if you, for example, need to work ahead, let's say that you just know that you're going to have a really hard third week in October and you want to get ahead of some of that work, you can go ahead and watch previous videos, watch previous lectures. If you want to do that to prepare yourself for class, feel free to do that as well. It's a resource that I make freely available. Feel free to peruse it and use it in whatever way you would help you. All right, so again, I'll post that link. It's in the lecture slide, but I'll post it as well as the Canvas so you can have easy access to that. All right, last thing about me. I am part of the Stigma-Free Initiative. So the Stigma-Free Initiative was started by the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and it's kind of designed to take mental illness out of the shadows and bring it into the light. It's sort of designed to change their attitudes about the way that we think about mental illness. So whereas we don't hide physical illnesses, whereas if you came in with a cold and somebody said, oh, do you have a cold? You wouldn't be like, this ain't a cold, I'm fine, I don't have a cold. But we don't do that with mental illness. And that stigma goes a long way towards not allowing people to receive the help that they need. So as part of the Stigma-Free Initiative, I just like to tell every class that I was diagnosed with a mental illness. I battle with depression, and I'm doing a lot better these days. But I just want to get it out there in the open. And I also want to let you know that if you do battle with this, if you are struggling with this, or if you know somebody who is struggling with a mental illness, one of the things that really occurs is that it seems hopeless. It oftentimes just seems that there's no chance, there's no light at the end of the tunnel, there's no hope of getting better. So one of the things that I like to do as part of this Stigma Initiative is show you that it does get better and it can get better. So here's a timeline starting with fall 2010, and that's when I started here at IUSB. And right about there was where I was diagnosed with depression in spring 2012. And I would love to tell you that that was when I developed depression, but because of things like the stigma that our society has against mental illnesses, It wasn't. I was actually suffering from depression for years before that, before it got to the point, and I'll be honest with you, it got to the point where my wife told me that I need to go seek help. So I got help. I was given cognitive behavioral therapy. I was put on prescription medication, and right about there was where my final prescription was filled. And I wish I could tell you that right at that time I was depression-free, but that's not the way that mental illness works. It's a constant battle. It's a constant continuing to get better, but still in the recovery phase, but every single day is better and better and better than the last. So just kind of give you a concrete measure of the difference that seeking help can get. So one very important thing to know is that I did not do this alone. I went to a mental health professional, and I needed to go to a mental health professional. So what we do in research and academics is you kind of measure somebody's success by how much do they publish. How many experiments do they publish? How many articles do they publish? So that's a measure of how good you're doing in your field. So while I was in the midst of depression, I got one publication, and that was in the fall of 2012. So not very productive, wasn't really getting much accomplished. I was battling with depression. But then as it got better, and it did, life got better. So in spring of 2016, 2 publications. In the fall of 2016, another publication. In spring of 2017, I was able to get 5 publications out. And I had to extend that. Let's go, keep going. In spring of 2018, another publication. And now in 2019, I have 3 publications coming with 1 additional one. So this is just to let you know that this is what it looks like when you're battling depression. It can get better. It can get much, much better. So as my sort of final stigma-free initiative message, I would encourage you that if you think you're battling with a mental illness, don't even wait until you know for sure, because honestly, our ability for self-deception is massive. So if you think that you're dealing with depression, or if you think you know somebody, a friend of yours, who's going through some hard times, maybe dealing with a mental illness, just go and seek professional help. There is a kind of trope or an idea in our society that the hero can overcome things on their own, that they can pull themselves up and will themselves to victory. And while that might be true in many endeavors, it is not in mental illness. You cannot beat this alone. You need professional help. So again, if you even think you might be going through issues with mental illness, or if you think somebody is, please do something, go and talk to somebody. And I am more than willing to be your first point of contact. Sometimes you just don't know where to start. So if you don't, if that's you, and you need to talk to somebody, come talk to me. I'm not a clinical psychologist, but I have been through it. I do know what what you're going through, and at the very least, I can help point you in the right direction. All right, so that's the end of the PSA. Let's get back to the course overview. So what are we going to be doing in stats? So this is going to be your introduction to statistics, and it has an emphasis on how it applies to psychology. So if this was just a statistics course, your textbook would be about that thick. If it's statistics for social sciences, that reduces it down to about that much, and then statistics for psychology reduces it a little bit more. So because of the nature of psychology, because of the types of questions that we ask and the type of experiments that we do, we don't need or use most of statistics. We use a portion of it, and that's where we're going to focus here so that you can get a clear understanding of the psychology that you need as the statistics that you need as a psychologist. So the concepts that we're going to take a look at: measures of central tendency, elementary probability, statistical inference, decision-making, hypothesis testing, analysis of variance. None of those words might make any sense to you right now. They will by the end of the semester. The other thing that we're going to be doing is you're going to be developing skills using software to do statistics. So we're going to start off in Excel, and then we're going to transition when we need to SPSS, which is a dedicated statistical software program. All right, objectives include you're going to learn how to use formulas in Excel to calculate statistical measures. You're going to use MyStatLab or MyLab to do your pre-test, post-test, and homework. Create and interpret frequency distributions. Calculate measures of central tendency. Calculate and interpret z-scores. Again, don't worry if none of these things sound familiar to you. They will by the end of the semester. Hypothesis testing is going to be a big portion of this course. It's going to be the second half of the course dedicated to hypothesis testing. And that's where we're going to start using SPSS in order to do things like a t-test and an ANOVA. All right, so one of the things to keep in mind when you're going through this course is, why are we doing all this? What's the importance of statistics? Why is it that we are dedicating an entire course so that you can learn the concepts to do and understand statistics? So I'll give you an example. So let's say that you were working as a psychologist and you were working in a clinic treating people with depression. And you wanted to test between two different treatments. There were two different treatments that you wanted to try out to see which one was better at treating depression. So we have, what you can do is you can take your clients and you can split them up into two groups. And one half, they receive treatment A. And the other half receives treatment B. And this is a standard type of experimental design. One half gets one treatment, the other half gets the other treatment. And let's say that at the end of this experiment, you measure their depression on Beck's depression inventory, and you see that the first treatment A, they have a Beck's depression inventory of 42.6. Those on treatment B, they have a Beck's depression inventory of 25.7. So our human mind, our ability to interpret numbers, right? You've had this ability since like grade 2, when you figured out greater than and less than. It is super easy to take a look at treatment B and say, hey, treatment B has lower depression scores. And our human mind tends to come to the conclusion that treatment B must be better. It must be effective, right? It's going to be good to get people off of treatment A and put them on treatment B. We should call up clinics around the world and say, hey, listen to this treatment, treatment B, it is really, really good at reducing depression. However, there's two possibilities as to why that's a lower score. Possibility number one is that it's a real difference. Treatment B is really better. And if that's the case, then we have an obligation, an ethical obligation as scientists, as psychologists, to spread the word about treatment B, to publish it in the journals, to call up the clinics and say, look, here is treatment B. Take your patients off of treatment A, put them on treatment B is better. That's just one possibility though. The other possibility is that was a fluke result. Maybe our groups were just chosen in a way that the group that received treatment B had lower depression. Maybe the way that we measured the depression just happened on that day to be lower for the ones in treatment B. There's a ton of possibilities, but the biggest thing to remember is it might have been a fluke result. And if it is a fluke result, if it is just a lucky result, or in this case an unlucky result, then if we call up the clinics and say, put your patients on treatment B, we have committed a disastrous error. We have put hundreds of thousands of people onto a treatment that doesn't work. So as psychologists, especially with the work that we do, we need a way to tell if something is a real difference or is it a fluke result. And our human minds are horrible at doing that. We just can't do it the way that we're wired, but that is exactly what statistics does. Statistics is going to give us the tools so we can intelligently and responsibly make a conclusion as to whether or not treatment B really is better than treatment A, in which case we spread the word and we help millions of people. Or was the difference just due to a chance result, to a fluke result, in which case we don't spread the word. We go back to the drawing board and we don't put hundreds of thousands of people in danger. It's important to know this. It's high stakes. This is the end game of statistics. This is what we're trying to get to. Now you might be saying to yourself, well, that's all well and good, but what if I don't want to pursue a career in psychology? Right? What if I just, I'm taking a degree, but my plans are elsewhere. I'm not going to go into clinical psychology. Well, statistics is still extremely important because of the world that we live in today, because of the biases and the spin and things that just we're being flooded with information that is coming from biased sources. And statistics and knowing how to encounter and deal with data will help you in any endeavor that you have make the decisions about whether a difference is real or whether it's imagined, whether a difference actually happened or whether it's the result of biased reporting or biased interpretations. So I'll give you an example that had nothing to do with clinical psychology, and it had everything to do with the movie Captain Marvel. So when Captain Marvel came out, it was one of these flagpole kind of moments for women in cinema. We just came off of Wonder Woman. It was a huge success. Now Captain Marvel was coming. I think it was the first Marvel movie that was led by a female protagonist. And the worry was that there was going to be a backlash against it, that male critics were going to review this movie unfavorably, that they were going to be biased against this movie. And sure enough, when the movie came out, it was not as highly reviewed as some of the other Marvel movies. And people started to interpret this in different ways. And one of those was to interpret it in terms of male critics reviewing this movie very negatively because of biases, stereotypes against women. So this is from the Mary Sue, and it said, Captain Marvel is fun, and most of the negative reviews are written by men. Shocking. So that was an interpretation. That was an opinion. They took a look at some of the reviews and said, well, take a look at these reviews. The males are reviewing this movie much more negatively. That could be a real difference, or that could be an interpretation that was biased, that was not real, where people just see what they're expecting to see. So because I took statistics and because I'm interested in this, I said to myself, well, let's take a look at what the reviews actually are. So I went to Rotten Tomatoes, and as much as I possibly could, I interpreted whether a critic was male or female by their picture or their name, and I just counted how many males gave positive reviews, how many males gave negative reviews, how many females positive, how many females negative, and I was able to analyze the data and get to the bottom, and there was no gender difference, there was no gender bias, and we'll learn what that p-value means in the reviews. So rather than drumming up all of this hysteria and basically outrage, there was nothing there. There was nothing to be outraged about. The male reviews were no more critical than the female reviews, and that came out in the statistics. So the statistics show that there was no real difference. It was an unbiased way of interpreting this, and that is becoming way more important in this world as people with agendas, with biases, continue to give their opinion. So if you never run another experiment after you graduate, if you never work in a clinical psychology setting after you graduate, take the tools that you learn in this class and use it to interpret the world around you. Because it's getting to the point where people are being misled very, very easily, and it's getting to the point where we need to know how to look at data and make sense of data without heaping all the biases that we invariably have on top of it. Oh, and incidentally, this is another example. The male critics, 82% fresh. Female critics, 87% fresh. In grade 3, you knew 87 was bigger than 82, but it's not a real difference. It's a fluke difference. That's what this p-value, and we'll learn about that p-value, that's what that p-value was saying. All right, more course overview. I am now going to give you the briefest history of statistics ever committed to a classroom. So this is just going to be a brief view about statistics and then a brief view about mathematics. All right, we'll start off with Francis Galton. Francis Galton is like the godfather of statistics. He invented many of the basic concepts that we use, such as the average. So if you ever wonder why when you're calculating an average you add up everything and divide by the number of items that you have, Francis Galton was the one that came up with that. So a lot of the things that we're going to be learning in the first half of this semester were invented and developed by Francis Galton. William Gossett. William Gossett came up with the t-test. And William Gossett was actually one of these really interesting statisticians, really interesting researchers who published under a pseudonym. He didn't want any credit. He published under student. So it became known as the student's t-test. So he was one of the last sort of anonymous contributors to science. Now we have anonymous contributors, but they're mostly online espousing conspiracy theories. All right, Ronald Fisher came up with the F-test, which we're going to see when we do ANOVAs. One of the most important tests for psychology because of how complex human behavior is. Named it the F-test for Fisher. In the F-test, to make it very useful, we're going to need to use the Tukey test named by John Wilder Tukey. So not very inventive with the naming of their tests, but again, this is something that's very important for psychology, allows us to see where differences are without introducing bias. So those were 4 very, very important statisticians. Now let's flip the switch and take a look at some mathematicians. So we got Euclid. Euclid was basically the inventor of geometry. He invented Euclidean space. So if you ever, go up and down, left and right, and then back and forth, that's Euclidean space. He invented Euclidean space along with many of the axioms of geometry. We got Pythagoras over here. He has the Pythagoras theorem, very famous for that. The square of the sides of a triangle equals the square of the hypotenuse. We got Isaac Newton, who developed calculus. So in addition to discovering gravity, he also actually simultaneously independently developed calculus. And then a more recent one in math, we have Kurt Gödel, who is very famous for his incompleteness theorem, which is an incredibly interesting idea and something I think that's going to be very important for our understanding of consciousness in humans. And if you ever want to kind of delve into the world of consciousness and Gödel's theories, highly recommend the book Gödel, Escher, and Bach. It is written by Douglas L. Hofstadter, and it is a book that is very approachable, very important, and it's very loved because of the way that it simply explained a lot of these concepts. And it was so influential that if you ever go on a mathematician's Facebook page or Instagram feed, you'll see pictures like this of them with their Gödel, Escher, and Bach, The Eternal Golden Braid book. So those are some mathematicians. So why, you might ask, are we going through this brief history of statistics and mathematics? I do this for one reason and one reason only. This is not going to be on the exam. I'm never going to ask you a question again about Galton or Fisher. But I do this for one reason, and it's to show you that the people that contributed to statistics, the great statisticians, and the people that contributed to math, the great mathematicians, were not the same people. There is no overlap. And what this should drive home is that in order to do great statistics, you do not need to have great mathematics. Okay, there is no overlap in these individuals. So I say this because one of the myths that students bring with them occasionally to statistics is that, well, it's math, it's a math course, and I've never been good at math, so therefore I'm not going to be good at statistics. And I just want to reiterate the point that the two of them are completely separate endeavors. You do not need to be great at math in order to be great at statistics. And you do not need very developed math skills in order to be great at statistics. Statistics is not math. You are going to learn exactly 2 new pieces of math, and we're going to learn that in next class, and then that is it. Everything else is just addition and division and reading graphs and things that you learned in high school. This is not a math course. So if you're coming in here saying, oh, you know, I've always struggled with math, so now this is going to be horrible stats, I'm not going to be able to do it, get that idea out of your mind. I've had students who have barely scraped by on their prerequisites to get into this course walk out of here with an A+, because statistics is not mathematics. You need some basic mathematics. All right, if you don't know how to add or divide, we're going to have problems. But as long as you have that basic amount, statistics is not about doing math. It's about applying math. It's about taking what you already know and learning how to use it in these new situations. So if you are at all worried that you're going to struggle in statistics because you're not a math person, get that idea out of your mind. And also, we'll talk about this a little bit in next class, get the idea that you're not a math person out of your mind as well. So one of the things we're going to try to do this semester is get out of what's known as a fixed mindset that says I am the way that I am and there's no changing me. And we're going to start to try to adopt the growth mindset that says I'm the way that I am right now, but I can change. So if you're saying I'm not a math person, that's using a fixed mindset. That's saying that's just the way that I am. If on the other hand you say, I currently struggle with math, that's a way of saying, but I'm going to get better. So try to think of it that way. But importantly, if you came in here worried that this is going to be math, it's not. It's statistics, it's applying math that you already know. And I can't stress that enough. You already know almost all the math that you're going to need. 2 pieces next class. But it's about applying it in situations to make sense of the world. All right, so what are we going to be doing in this course? What are we going to learn if we're not learning math? We're going to learn to change the way that we think. You're going to learn how to think like a statistician. So you're going to learn how to think like Ronald Fisher so that when you see data, when you see a question, you start to think in statistical ways to get to the truth. So this is something that, unlike just about any other course that I teach, more so, and I can't emphasize this enough, statistics needs to be practiced. You might be able to get through your other courses just by reading the concepts, and then you're like, oh, I understand that. I read this personality theory. I understand this personality theory. I read this cognitive psychology theory, and I understand it. And that could be true. You might. It's possible. It's impossible with statistics. Statistics needs to be done. It needs to be practiced. So that's actually good news, because I'm going to assume that nobody has been practicing statistics in their free time. So I'm going to assume that none of you have been hitting up the Wikipedia pages and conducting t-tests and hypothesis tests. So the good news is that everybody starts at the beginning. You are all statistics novices, and you're all starting on the same platform. And the other good news is that this is something that everyone can do. So I have developed a statistical learning procession, right? It's a statistical learning program that you're going to go through. And I have taken people, like I said, who have excelled in mathematics, and by the end of the semester they got an A+ in statistics. I took people who barely scraped by on their prerequisites, and by the end of the semester they got an A+ in statistics. Statistics is really something that can be done by everybody, I have never met a student who did not have the skills to do statistics. So keep that in mind. It is challenging. It's not going to be a straight shot through for everybody. You're going to encounter obstacles. You're going to encounter challenges. But just know that if you stick to it, stick to the program, do the kind of practice that I'm giving you opportunities for, you will succeed in this course. But the big thing is you need to practice. So because of that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the time, and this is a math clock, so that's 1, that's 2, that's 3. And if you don't know that, don't worry, because you don't need math for this course. But what I'm going to do is, as much as possible, I'm going to try to split up our meeting time into half of a lecture, and then the other half is going to be dedicated to practice. So this is a little bit of a weird class, this first one, because there's not much to practice. This is just to get everybody on board so we all know what we're doing. But for the rest of the course, I'm going to introduce the material. We'll talk about some of the concepts. We'll go over, some practice problems together, being led by me. And then what I'm going to try to do is the rest of the class, the other half of the class, I'm going to say, all right, here's some practice for you. Try it. Go do it. And this is when that previous slide with my name on it might come in handy. So if you're practicing, you tried it once, it doesn't work. You tried it again, it doesn't work. You took a look at the lecture slides, still not working. Pop the hand up. Dr. Udich, I'm having trouble. And I do this only in this class where I've had this amount of practice because you need to do statistics. So again, do not think for a second that you can get through this just reading and then understanding. You need to do it. So the question then becomes, well, how much practice should you do? So just to illustrate the importance of practice, this is my video that I use to get this idea through. So we'll watch this video and then continue on with our look at the course. I said, we'll watch this video, there we go, and then continue with the course. All right, so how much practice do you need? So, a little over the top, a little crude, sure, why not? Hopefully it will stick in your memory. Another way to think about how much practice you need is you want to practice not until you can get it right. You want to practice until you cannot get it wrong. So that's going to become more apparent as we go through this course. So for example, Z-scores. Z-scores are one of the first kind of big challenges that students will encounter. And when you're doing a Z-score, maybe you'll get it wrong in the first time. Maybe you'll get it wrong in the second time. Maybe you'll get it wrong in the third time. Finally, on the fourth try, you get it right. That's not where you stop practicing. You then do it again. On the fifth try, you get it right. On the sixth try, you get it right. On the seventh try, maybe you get it wrong again. Eighth try, you get it right. And you keep going and going and going until you sit down to a Z-score to calculate it, and there is no way, no possibility that you're going to get it incorrect. And the reason that you do that is because that's how you build the skill, and more importantly for you in this course, that's how you do well on the exams. Because you do not want to practice a minimal amount and then get to the exam, and when they ask you, who are you, you say, I'm Bruce Wayne. All right? You don't want your mind to go blank on that exam. You want your mind on that exam when you open up that Excel sheet to be like, oh, I couldn't possibly get this wrong. Let me do this exam, and you get yourself 100%. So keep that in mind when you're practicing. You'll have ample opportunities to practice. We got pre-tests, we got post-tests, we got homework assignments, we got in-class practice, we got extra Excel practice sheets. We have all these opportunities for you to grow. Make sure that you're taking advantage of those so that it just becomes automatic and it's almost like you can't get it wrong anymore. Other things to remember, to think about in this course, other mindsets to kind of have. The course overview, you can visualize this course in the following way. That's you right now. And what you're bringing to this course is you're bringing a certain amount of knowledge. That's what that pillar is that you're standing on top of. You're bringing a certain amount of knowledge, and you're bringing certain skills. So you're bringing certain math skills, you're bringing certain computer skills. That's the plank that you have brought with you. This is where we're starting this semester. This is where you are today, right now. This is where we're going to get to. We're going to get you on top of that pillar right there. And you might notice that currently, with your knowledge and your skills, there's no way for you to get up there. And if you want to confirm this for yourself tonight, flip to chapter 10 and just try to read a little bit of it. It'll make no sense to you whatsoever because it requires this type of a pillar. So what are we going to do? Well, we're going to increase your knowledge. So you're going to read about certain concepts. You're going to come to class. We're going to learn about statistical procedures. You're going to increase your knowledge. And then we're going to increase that bit by bit by bit. And the other thing that you're going to do is you're going to take the skills that you have and you're going to use it to get to that next pillar of knowledge. But then notice what happens is that in order to get to the next pillar, your skills aren't enough. The plank's not long enough. So what do we need to do? We need to practice. We need to get those skills practiced, automatic, developed, so that your plank gets longer and you can cross over to the next pillar. And we're going to keep doing that until finally, at the end of it, on that final exam, you practice your skills, you developed your knowledge, you get to the top, and you look back on your semester and you think to yourself, why was I ever worried about this course? Why did I ever think stats was going to be that difficult? It's straightforward, we got here, I get it. Now the one thing that you don't ever want to do in this course is you never want to try to get to the next set of concepts without developing your skills. Because if you do that, you're going to end up down here. So I've seen this happen to students before. An easy way to know if you've fallen into the pit is if you attend a lecture and it makes no sense whatsoever, that's an indication that you haven't developed your skills enough for that new knowledge. So that's a nice kind of measure. If you ever leave a lecture and you think to yourself, oh my goodness, what was that? I have no idea what's going on. And then maybe you go home and you watch the YouTube post of that lecture. If after that you're like, still nothing, that means that you're down here. If you fall down here, you can get back up. I can help you get back up, but you need to develop those skills. So if it ever happens where you're in a class and you're like, I didn't understand that at all, that's a signal that you're down there. That's also a signal that you need to maybe practice your skills a little bit more. Maybe you need to come by to an office hour so we can develop your knowledge a little bit more, but something needs to be done. You'll notice that this course starts and builds on every single class. So the things we learn in second class, we're going to use in the third class. The concepts and skills we learn in the third class, we're going to use in the fourth class. It builds in a linear way. You can't skip it. You can't skip a set of ideas and think you're going to be able to do it. So if that happens, come see me and do it as soon as you can, because as the year progresses, your chances to get back up on that pillar are going to become less and less and less. I have helped numerous students get out of this pit, so there's no, first off, there's no judgment. Like I said, people go through stats at different rates, different trajectories. But again, if you ever come out of a lecture and you're confused, something needs to be done. And if that something is coming to me during an office hour and getting help, by all means, please do that. All right, course procedure. I like to run the course like a research lab meeting, which means that all concepts are open to ideas and discussion. Just raise your hand, go back to that slide, Dr. Udich. Can we talk about this a little bit more? And we'll be happy to do that. I'm a very firm believer that there are no bad questions or bad ideas. You know the phrase, there's no bad questions except the ones that are not asked. However, there are wrong ideas, so get ready for it. Statistical thinking is not intuitive. It's not something we just learn how to do. In fact, anti-statistical thinking is intuitive, right? Biased thinking is intuitive. So you're going to have wrong ideas about stats, and it could be as high as 95% of your ideas about what statistics is wrong. And that's just the way that science works. So that's my life in experimental psychology. Half of the time, well, more than half of the time, I think an experiment's going to go one way, and it goes the complete opposite way. So I understand it, I get it, you know, no judgment again. Let's make sure that we clear out all the bad ideas so that we can get to that correct understanding of stats. All right, we're going to finish off with just some syllabus highlights. Contact and Canvas. So there's my office right there, just upstairs. Those are the office hours, so they're Tuesdays and Thursdays, so they're on the days we meet, and they are after, well, not directly after class, but they are early in the early afternoon and one in the late afternoon. So again, if you are confused in a lecture, perfect opportunity to stick around a little bit more, come by one of my office hours. I'll be more than happy to go through that with you. There's the phone number for my office. Please don't use it. I don't answer it, and I still have a little red blinking light that tells me I have messages that I don't know how to access. If you do want to get in contact with me, use Canvas messages. Do not use my official IUSB email for course work. I don't check my IUSB email as much as I should. I'm committed to checking Canvas once a day, so once every 24 hours. So that's my turnaround time. So if you need to get into contact with me, do it through Canvas messages. I will respond as promptly as I can, and it just helps me keep everything organized, lets me know what class you're contacting me for. In terms of Canvas, I post my lecture notes, lecture slides, to Canvas. So these slides right now are available for you to download in the Files tab in Canvas. And that's going to be very important during the exams as well, and you'll find out why in just a little bit. Required text and required resources. I use the IU eText initiative, so all of you are now enrolled and signed up, and you can get your MyLab statistic links through Canvas. So if you go to Canvas, if you go to just the home page, or alternatively the modules, this is where you have access to all your MyStats information. We'll go through MyLab, MyStats in more detail in next class, but I just want you to know that that's how you access it. You can access it through Canvas. Your eText has a link right about down there. So I would recommend just make sure that you have access tonight, tomorrow. Just go through, explore it. Send me a message if you cannot get to MyLab. It is what we're going to be using for the majority of the work we're going to be doing this semester. All right, other resources that we're going to be using. We are going to be using Excel in this course, and we are going to be using SPSS in this course. If you're at IUSB, so if you're doing your work here on one of these computers or one of the computers that say up in the psych lab, it has these programs installed. So you can access Excel for free, you can access SPSS for free here at IUSB. If you're doing your work at home, on the other hand, you have access to Excel for free. So as students of IUSB, you can install Excel, Microsoft Office on your home computers for free. So they bought and paid for the licenses for you to install that on your home computer. For SPSS, it's a little bit different. It's free. So the first thing I want everybody to know, you do not have to pay extra for SPSS. And the reason I want everybody to know this is because if you try to install SPSS on your home computer, it will ask you for a subscription fee, right? So it'll ask you for 1 year of access or 6 months of access, and it'll ask you for money for that. That's if you want to install it on your home computer. But you don't need to do that because it is available for free through the IU Anywhere platform. So this is a streaming cloud solution where we have the program installed on our servers here, and we've paid the license for you to access those servers for free. So as long as you have an internet connection, you can get that for free, and you can just go to one IU, it's IU Anywhere, and that's how you're going to access SPSS. So I just want you to be aware of that. SPSS is in the second half of this course, but I just don't want anybody buying a subscription fee unnecessarily. All right, a few more things, and then we'll jump to the course, the syllabus. Performance evaluations. There are a bunch of things that we'll do for to kind of evaluate performance to help you practice. First thing is pre-tests. So these are tests that are designed to prepare you for class. These are ones where you read the chapter on your own, do the test prior, and then come to class and learn it. I include these because the evidence is overwhelming that student learning outcomes are vastly improved by pre-tests. I have read the course evaluations. I know they're not a favorite of students, but learning it on your own, doing it on your own, failing at it on your own, just has multiple benefits that pay off in the back end. So that's why I include the pre-tests. And many of these assignments and pre-tests, I just want to call to your attention, cannot be completed after the due date. They are immediately graded by my lab and then put out for assessment. So just bear that in mind, get your schedule. We'll go over how to read the schedule in just a couple of minutes, but please be on top of that because I'm really trying to cut down on the emails that ask for extensions or ask for it to be reopened. I have my text already pre-written out and copied about how that can't be done in this particular instance. So please just make it a point not to miss these pre-tests and post-tests as well. So there's pre-tests before each chapter. If you do poorly on a pre-test, okay, so I understand it's new material, sometimes it's challenging. I exist because you can't learn stats on your own, right? Professors exist because it's not enough for you to just do this on your own. Because of that, we have study mastery plan points, and they are a way of getting your pre-test up to 100% if you don't do well on the pre-test. So it's important to try the pre-test, but it's not going to harm your grade if you're struggling with the pre-test, because you will have an opportunity after coming to class, after learning the material, after practicing it, to go back and earn mastery points to offset your pre-test grade if you're struggling with the pre-test. All right, so again, go through the syllabus for certain caveats and things to know about when you can and can't complete it. One thing to know is that every assignment, every pre-test, every post-test is available now. So you can access all of them whenever you like. And then you can, again, just be aware of the due dates because many of those cannot be accessed afterwards. All right, same thing with post-tests. Once you do the pre-test, once we go over the class, once you do the homework, You will then have a chance to reaffirm what you know, what you've learned during a post-test. So again, be on the lookout for those. We're going to have 4 exams during this course. The big thing to know about the exams is that they are open book. And what I mean by open book is they are open anything you want to use other than communication with other people. So these exams are basically my way of assessing, can you do statistics in the real world? And in the real world, all they want to know is that can you independently do statistics? So if somebody came to me and said, Dr. Dietrich, I have all this data, can you analyze it? All they want to know is, can you get that done? And they don't care if I sit down on my computer and I look at the data and I say, I know exactly how to do this, run the stats and I'm done. Or I take a look at the data and say, oh man, I forgot how to do this. Google YouTube tutorial on how to do this, and then watch the video and get it done. All that matters is that I can get it done. We're going to do that for this course as well. All I care for the exams is that you can get it done. So keep that in mind, because I'm always amazed how many students seem to forget that it's open book, especially on the first exam. Keep that in mind. It's open anything. So you have access to the lecture notes. You're going to have access to the practice Excel sheets that we've done. You're going to have access to your text. You're going to have access to any notes that you want to bring, any sort of procedural diagrams you want to make, anything you need to do your stats, because this course is not about memorization. The stats that I do, I did not memorize. What's going to happen is you're going to do it over and over and over and over again to the point where you don't have to memorize it, you already know it. That's the end goal. You're not going to get there immediately, so feel free to bring any resources that you might want for these exams. The one thing I ask you to bear in mind, though, is that it's open book, but you cannot learn the material during the exam. You will run out of time. So if you are, if the exam, on the first exam, will do z-scores. If you take a look at the question on z-scores, and you say to yourself, oh, okay, z-scores. Man, what was the formula for that? Let me look that up. Oh, there's the formula. Okay, let me calculate some z-scores. You will do awesome. That's the point of the open book exam. If, on the other hand, you get to that question about z-scores, and you're like, z-scores? What are z-scores? Let me take a look at that chapter. A z-score is a distribution that is, you're not going to do well. You're toast. You're going to run out of time. So learn the material. Don't memorize it. Understand it. Know what it's all about. And have that in your back pocket, that you don't have to spend any time in this course memorizing formulas, memorizing procedures. You will eventually memorize it, but you'll memorize it by doing because, again, you got that open book. All right, makeup exams. The only thing that I ask for a makeup exam is if you have to do a makeup exam, it's got to be beyond your control and it has to be documented. I'm flexible on the beyond your control. All right, maybe your car broke down and you couldn't make it in. Maybe your babysitting fell through and you had to stay home and watch your children. Maybe they had a fever so they couldn't go to the daycare. Maybe you were sick. I am very inflexible on beyond your control. The one thing I'm not flexible on is documented. It has to be documented. So if you're sick, I need a doctor's note. If your car breaks down, I need the repair bill or the tow truck bill. If your babysitting falls through, if you can't take your child to daycare because the child had a fever, get your daycare to drop me an email. If your boss tells you that you have to go on a company retreat in order to do some team building, forward me the email from your boss. I can understand these things. I know life happens, but I need the documentation. That's just one thing that needs to be done. And then if you do want to write up the exam, take a look at the syllabus for where to, who to contact. You need to talk to the psych lab in order to do the exam. Homework assignments, we got homework assignments. These you can turn in late, but you lose 20% of any uncompleted questions per day. So again, just get these things in on time. You'll find out that it's not overwhelming, but do make sure that you are aware of your due dates. All right, check out the policies on excused absences. I just want to really quickly get to two last things. First off, in terms of grading, I know that statistics has different pathways for different people. I know that many of you will develop quickly, many of you might take a little bit longer to develop your statistical skills. So the breakdown of where your points come from is pretty standard, except for this. So what I do is I take your best exam, the one that you do best at, and that's going to be worth the most in terms of your exams. Your second best exam is worth less, your third best exam is worth less, and your worst exam is going to be worth the least. And what this is what I like to call built-in forgiveness into the grading scheme. And what that means is, let's say for the first exam, you're still working on your skills, you're still developing your abilities, you're not quite there yet, and you don't do well on the exam. No worries, it's only 5% of your grade. So even if you get 40% on that first exam, you've only lost 3% towards your final grade. You can still get an A+. So it's got that built-in forgiveness, just in case you're struggling at the beginning. So just remember that. Don't freak out. You know, you're going to be doing all right. All right, and then the last thing, kind of running out of time here, so I will just very quickly show this. So this is the syllabus. It's available in Canvas. Please download it. Please take a look at the class schedule here. This is how I want you to read the class schedule. The class schedule here, so for example, class number 2, August 29th, tells you what we're going to be covering. It'll also tell you what new topics are going to be covered. So the ones in black, the new homework topics covered, that's just to let you know when we're going to learn the things you need for these homework assignments. Importantly, in red is when those homework assignments are due. So we are going to be on September 2nd by midnight. So it's always due midnight the day before, usually, and again, check the dates. You got homework assignment number 1, the MyStat tutorial, and how can you fulfill your potential with mindset, and you got your chapter 1 pre-test. So we got nothing due for next class. We got those due for a week from today. It's always going to be due Monday by midnight or Wednesday by midnight to make sure that we have it done in ample time. So I would highly recommend take a look at the class schedule, become familiar with those. Do not miss your deadlines. Please pick up those points and make sure that you're getting rewarded for the work that you're doing. All right, we made it. That's the end of what I wanted to cover today. So I will see you all next class. And as it's not official homework, go to Canvas, get into MyStatLab, make sure that you can access it, make sure that you can get in. Sometimes it's a little finicky depending upon the browser that you're using. So if there's any issues, let me know, but do try to get that. Other than that, we are done for today.